Oh, 2013. Wasn't that a strange era when you had developers finally realizing that the Romans were cool and they should actually make games about them? But there was one game that I'd been looking forward to since I first laid my eyes on the Total War franchise. Back in 2008, I was a young boy that loved playing on his Xbox 360, never really having experienced PC games. But then one Christmas, my brother bought me a game. It was a game called Rome Total War that I had never heard of before, so I booted it up on my dad's old computer, which was, yes, beige, and I started playing, and from then on I was completely addicted. I remember going away for Christmas with my family and constantly being excited getting back to go and play that game, doing as much research on the game as possible as you used to as a young kid. Even though coming into the game 4 or 5 years after its initial release, this was my first foray into PC gaming. But 2013 came around and Total War Rome 2 was announced, and whilst I was over the moon, the release of it didn't really live up to what everyone expected. I didn't get it upon release because that was back in the day when I didn't have my own computer. I couldn't really run it on anything, and I was saving up for a laptop for my paper round. And even if I could get that money for the laptop, I wouldn't have anything left for the game itself. But a few months later, I was able to buy the game. And whilst at first it didn't really hit me, it didn't really grasp me the same way the first one did, I still enjoyed it. And I played it for a few years, and yes, it was great, but coming in and out of games and having the heyday of Mount & Blade Warband, going to events and playing with people there, I never really spent a lot of time in it. But now in 2019, why is it the game I keep coming back to? Last year I started a new campaign and I played it for 40-50 hours. A few days ago I started another campaign, and once again I played it for 4-5 hour sessions at a time. Why is this game special to me, and why do I keep coming back to it? Let's look at the graphics though. I mean, it still looks gorgeous to this day, and graphically it still holds up. I mean, the explosions look gorgeous. Setting your onagers to explosive shot which do more damage against infantry is so satisfying, especially when the AI, which granted isn't great but proves a lot of fun for heavy siege pieces, tends to clump up. Here you're able to get some really good shots in and your artillery does a lot of damage, and seeing people fly away, switching to flaming shot and seeing people burning on the ground. And back then in 2013, this was the first Total War which really took these animations to the next level with varying amounts of success. Going into sieges and honing your artillery on certain parts of the wall, breaking them down. The best bits for me was when you got a massive wall with defenders on it, and then you were able to actually break them down and people would go flying, watching them cascade to the floor along with the rubble as your cavalry then charged through the breach. It looked gorgeous, and even in 2019 today, it still looks gorgeous. Whilst graphic mods can help it, the base game itself for me still holds up. I mean, of course, you've got war dogs, and you do miss the flaming pigs of the original Rome Total War, which unfortunately I would say docks a large amount of points for me, since they were really a staple of any pork lover's diet. But the campaign really stuck out. And for me at least, it had that addictive nature that I'd only experienced in games like Cities Skylines and Civilization 5. It had an upgrade system for each faction, and the structures and upgrades that you could put were never ending, it seemed. For me, my personal preference with campaign games is to have new things to discover to keep it fresh and keep you going. You want to carry on upgrading, you want to get the right buildings to get the right troops, but because there's always a building that gives you another set of troops, another better upgraded set of troops, always keeping it interesting and bringing out new things that you can go to. Going from Hastati to Legionaries, going from these Legionaries to the first cohort, or the Principes to then eventually the Evocati cohorts. Having this upgrade system and having your troops get badasser and badasser is what kept me going. No doubt it is my favourite Total War that I keep going back to. Granted, it can be rather easy in the later game, and maybe that's even got something in it for me. Someone that doesn't have the time to delve into in-depth games, having a job that they've got to sustain and go into uni, and not able to delve into games as much as I used to be able to. So maybe having the easier game is something that actually makes it more accessible to me. But it seems like sometimes at the end of the game you're stomping through people during the late game, but I always feel if I then start a new campaign, that then the new faction I'm always playing a different story. It never seems to feel the same, even though there isn't all that much variation looking at from the outside. This has got a lot to do with the graphics and the textures and the units and how they look. They really make it feel fresh. But this series isn't a review series. The incredible games that I look at in this series have never been an in-depth look at all the mechanics and a piece-by-piece tearaway at the different sections of the games. If I'm going to be honest, it's always been more of a therapy session for me, a time and a place for me to gush about my favourite games to you guys, to maybe games that you have never played before and maybe ones that you have, and it just brings back moments of nostalgia for not only me but for you as well. Happiness that you used to experience in games in the past, and appreciate some pieces of art that I love. But what does it for me? The sound design, hearing weapons clashing, the armor, the weapons, the formations. I literally could spend hours and hours just watching the units on the battlefields, and I do, pressing K to go into the cinematic mode, even in intense battles when I'm going to be losing and it's a matter of life and death, sorting out all my Romans, and I make them just to look as cool as possible, so I can look at them in this cinematic mode while they're fighting, and even just marching along. I love to just watch them. And whilst I love playing with new factions and trying new routes to glory, new playstyles with pikes or cavalry or guerrilla tactics, at the end of the day, I feel like I always come back to Rome. The look of their armor, the way they fight, and how badass you feel marching rows of legionaries into enemy towns, wondering what it must look like from the other side. Some of my earliest videos were Rome 2 cinematics, and whilst they were terrible, whilst the quality wasn't up to standards of cinematics that you would expect to see on YouTube these days, and whilst it was done on a terrible £300 HP Pavilion laptop with a Core i5 and no graphics chip in sight, I loved it. I loved watching them fight. Even on the lowest graphics, it was so visually pleasing to me. I mean, at the end of the day, Rome has always been a passion for me. I mean, there's a reason I spend so much goddamn money on time on these guys. I might have these and these guys too, but I mean, the Romans need someone to slaughter, don't they? I think you all probably agree with me. But never have I experienced a game quite like Total War Rome 2. Whilst other Total Wars, yes, granted, I do agree, are so much better mechanically and gameplay-wise. I mean, whilst I've been playing a lot of Three Kingdoms recently, it is so much better gameplay-wise. Having the whole population mechanics, all the different things you can do with that is so much better than Rome 2, and I accept that, and I know that. But for some reason, Rome 2 is still my go-to blanket game. The one I always go back to after a hard day of spouting shit about Banlord. The one that I'd launch a campaign up in the evening and then realise it's 3 in the morning and I should probably get some sleep. The one that no matter what happens, it will always be the game that I come back to. Whilst originally that was Rome Total War, and I know it is a better game on the outside, for some reason as soon as Rome 2 came out, that was then my go-to game. And I know I'm not alone in this. Everyone has the game that they always go back to. No matter how bad it really is on the outside, no matter what the reviews and what other people think about it, there's always a game that you love and you don't quite know why. You don't quite understand if it's nostalgia or it actually is a great game. But it doesn't really matter at the end of the day. The only thing that matters is that you come back to it and you enjoy playing it while it's there. And I know everyone has that game, but for me, it is Rome Total War 2.